Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started tonight. I'm going to take off my mask for just one moment to say hello, to say Shabbat Shalom, to remind you that you all have chosen to be here, which we are so thrilled that you are here tonight. And we want you to be able to focus tonight. So if you have a device, a watch, a phone, I don't know who carries a pager, but maybe you still carry a pager. Please turn it off or put it on Do Not Disturb or silent so that it does not distract you and does not distract anyone else tonight. We ask, please, that while you are in the sanctuary to leave your mask on and make sure that it is on properly over your nose and over your mouth. If you have a reading part when you are coming up here, if you would like, you are welcome to take off your mask for your reading part and then place it back on afterwards. You'll see that I will leave my mask on for the rest of the service so that you all can feel comfortable doing whatever it is that you would like to do up here. We are so pleased that we are joined by our choir tonight, who is going to provide wonderful music for us. And on that note, we begin with Ki Eshmera Shabbat, that the choir is going to sing, the words of which can be found on page 11. It's my pleasure now to invite up Jonna Ruggles to lead us in our candle blessing on page 2.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'had l'kner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Amen.
We continue now with L'cha Dodi, the words of which can be found on page 20. As a reminder, we will rise at verse 9 and face the entryway to welcome in Shabbat. Please rise, and we face the entrance. We remain standing. We continue on page 28 with the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed. Please be seated. And this is why we have a song later, because sometimes what comes out of my mouth is the high holiday nusach for the Baruch Hu. But luckily, you all knew it and sang right along with me. It was so great, so thank you for doing that. We continue now with Mariv Aravim on page 30. It is my pleasure to invite up Nate Eatman on the eve of his bar mitzvah to lead us.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokma poteya sha'arim, uvuna meshane itim, umahalif et hazmanim, umsader et hakokavim, b'mishmerotehem, barakia kirsono borei, yom v'layla goleo, or mipnei Hoshe v'Hoshe mipnei or uma'avir yom umevi laila umavdil bein yom uvein laila. Adonai Isfaot Shmo El Hai v'Kayam Tamid Imo Halenu L'Olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Please rise as we continue with the Shema on page 34. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Please be seated. We continue with the Ve'ahavta on page 36, and it's my pleasure to invite up Maya Eatman on the eve of their bat mitzvah to lead us in Ve'ahavta.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, וחיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבביך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך uvlechtecha v'aderech, uvshochbecha uvkumecha, uchshartam le'odecha, v'hayu l'totafot bein einecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvisharecha, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי ואתם שרים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתיכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together.
We continue on page 43. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukkot shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. We continue now with Vishamru on page 44. We continue now with the Amidah, which begins on page 46. Please rise. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chaste Avot V'imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Hozer Umoshia Umagen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Vezrat Saram, Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechaye Metim Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hagashem, Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, Mechaye Metim Berachamim Rabim, Zomech Noflim Verofech Holim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishene Afar, Michamucha Baal Gevurot, Umido Melach, Melech Memi Tumechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah le'achayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hametim, Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kadoshim b'chol yom yehalelucha selah, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Please be seated. We continue on page 59. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. We continue now with Shalom Rav on page 60. We continue now with a few moments of silent prayer or reflection using either the words of our hearts or the words of the pages in front of us. We continue now with our Torah service, which begins on page 244. Just a note about the Hakafah and a reminder that at this point we still are asking people to refrain from reaching over to touch the Torah. We do hope at some point in the future to be able to do that. But at this point, when the Torah proceeds around during the Hakafah, we ask you to not reach over. You're welcome to make signs of affection, however you would like, as the Torah proceeds. We continue with Ein Kamocha on page 244. Please rise. We continue with Ki Mitzion on page 246. Gadlu l'Adonai iti uneromema shemo yachdav. Please be seated. We find ourselves In the Torah portion of the book of Genesis, this Torah portion is called Vayechi. It is the final Torah portion in the book of Genesis. Jacob, on his deathbed, blesses his first grandchildren, Manasseh and Ephraim, followed by his 12 sons. Although if you read the text, you will see that those blessings that he offers to his sons are less blessings than they are beratements and disappointments for the ways that his sons have acted. Not really what you want to hear from your parent on their deathbed, truly, but that's what he gives them. So when Jacob dies, he's buried, we find out, in Hebron, in the cave of the field of the Machpelah. Joseph's brothers then become anxious that Joseph will seek retribution against them for their prior actions now that Jacob has died. However, Joseph assures his brothers that he has truly forgiven them and will care for all of them as well as their families. If you would like to follow along in our commentary tonight, our Chumash can be found underneath your seats, and it can be found on page 294. Ya'amod Lev ben Ze'ev Wolf v'fegel halevi la'aliyah.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam ba'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam ba'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bochar banu micha ha'ami v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Vayehi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva esrei shana. Vayehi yamei Yaakov shnei chayai sheva shanim ve'arba'im u'me'at shana. Vayikravu yamei Yisrael lamut. Vayikra livno liYosef. Vayomer lo im na matzati chen be'inecha. Simna yadcha tachat yerechi. Va'asita imadi chesed ve'emet. El na tikbareni b'Mitzrayim, v'shachti et avotai v'nisatai miMitzrayim, v'kibartani bikvurotam, v'yomer anochi ese kitvarecha, v'yomer tishba li, v'yishba lo, v'tishtachu Yisrael al rosh hamita.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah demet v'kayelam no besokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. And while we have the Torah out in our midst, we take a moment now to think of those in our community, our friends and family who are in need of healing. In this Shabbat, we think of Elwood Frederick Bryan, Joan Katz, Kristen Nystro, Lori Johnson, Jim Hines, Richard Vane, Arthur Lang, Heather Borzak, Franny Ein, Kathy Minardi, Karen Mullen-Koski, Dick McLean, Quincy Newman, Brooke Ann Godesman, Bridget Stern, Jim Barry, Johnny Dew, Amanda Ray Rauer, Gary Tatiner, Mark Zellman, Cheryl Hildebrand, Lila Warshawski, Cheryl Ball, John Eulenberg, Label Cohen, Evan Georgie, Bill Green, Rhonda Rhodes, David Menikoff, Stacia Thaman, Carol Pretmar, Jamie Koznowski, Robin Channon, Rosalind Hoffman, Joy Rosenthal, and all who suffer whom we know not by name. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, Ve'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel V'Leah, Hu Yivarech V'Yirapeh et Kol Cholei Yisrael, Ve'yishlach Lahem Bimhera Refuah Shlema, Refuat HaNefesh, U'Refuat HaGuf, V'Nomar. Amen. We continue now singing together Mishaberach, the words of which can be found on page 253. Mishaberach Avotenu habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu, mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We continue now as we lift and dress the Torah. Ya'amod David Alter ben Avraham v'Sara Hagba, Ta'amod Rachel bat Miriam Galila. Please rise. Please be seated. It's my pleasure at this time to invite up Bianca Spala to lead us in our prayer for Israel and Patricia Rosenman to lead us in our prayer for the country. These prayers can be found on pages 258 and 259.
O Heavenly One, protector and redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen.
O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Help us to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we serve you. Bless our country, that it may always be a stronghold of peace and its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within its borders, health and happiness within its homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship among the inhabitants of all lands, and may the love of your name hallow ever home in every heart. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. Amen.
Please rise as we return the Torah to the Ark. You can find the words to Etz Chaim Hi on page 256. Please be seated. As I was sitting and trying to decide what to write about tonight, I was struck by just how quickly the secular new year is approaching. Since March of 2020, with every new year, I think many of us have thought, well, things can only go up from here, right? We as Jews, we even get some extra New Year's in there, and how many of us have asked that question, hoping that every 6 months or so, whatever follows will be better than what has passed? For many of us, the new year is filled with hope for a better future for ourselves and our loved ones, and relief that the previous year has ended. We can wrap up the previous year and put a definitive period at the end of the past year as we look with excitement and possibility towards the new year to come. This week, our Torah portion, Vayechi, is also about conclusions in a few different ways. Vayechi is the final Torah portion in the book of Genesis. This book not only is the final Torah portion, but it's bookended by death, even though the name of it, Vayechi, and he lived. It begins with the death of Jacob and culminates with the death of Joseph. Jacob, as it describes in the beginning of the portion, wants to offer blessings to his children and his grandchildren, although he skips his children and goes straight to his grandchildren, the children of Joseph first. This is no surprise to those of us who know the previous stories of Joseph, who is Jacob's favorite and who was sold into slavery by his brothers. While the analysis of the blessings, or lack thereof, for Jacob's sons is certainly interesting, what I actually want to focus on is the interaction that Jacob has with his grandchildren, Manasseh and Ephraim. As Jacob is blessing his grandsons, he says that they will be like sons to him, even comparing them to Reuben and Simeon, the oldest of his children. What's particularly interesting about Jacob's interaction with Manasseh and Ephraim, who we presume he had known and previously interacted with, was that as Jacob sees his grandchildren, he asks Joseph, Mi ele, who are these boys? It's curious that Jacob, who was so keen to give this honor of the first blessing to Manasseh and Ephraim, doesn't recognize his grandsons in that moment. We learn a few verses later that Jacob's eyes were, quote, dim with age, he could not see. We can look at this verse and interpret it a few different ways. If we take the literal translation, we might say that Jacob asked to see his grandchildren, or asked who his grandchildren were, because his eyesight was so poor in his old age that he could only see Manasseh and Ephraim if they were right in front of him. Otherwise, they would have been a blur to him. We can also, though, interpret this phrase more figuratively, and in this we can compare the death of Jacob to the death of Moses, which occurs in Deuteronomy. When describing the death of Moses, it is written that Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were undimmed and his vigor unabated. Moses was strong and vibrant when he died, as compared to Jacob, who was weak, worn out, and nearly blind at his death. And while it is possible that Jacob asked the question, who are they, because he truly could not see his grandsons, it's also possible that there was more than meets the eye when interpreting this question. The Eitz Chaim commentary writes of this section of Torah, and it says, or did he fail to recognize Ephraim and Manasseh because, having been born and raised in Egypt, they were indistinguishable from Egyptian youths, suggesting that, in part, Jacob could not see his grandchildren because there was a generational gap that had grown too wide. Perhaps it is that Jacob could not see or understand his grandsons' lives, having grown old in a time of various cultural biases. Ephraim and Manasseh, having been born and raised in Egypt, are more easily able to assimilate into Egyptian society, a concept that is truly more than scary to Jacob, who worries that if they assimilate too much, they will lose their cultural identity as Israelites and Jews. What we might expect to end in a somewhat of a standoff battle between the generations actually ends up in a beautiful interaction. The commentary Goes on to tell us that tradition has it that the grandsons, Manasseh and Ephraim, reassured Jacob by reciting the Shema, Shema Yisrael. We may look like Egyptians, they said, but we affirm the same God as our father and our grandfather. Ephraim and Manasseh understand the delicate nature of the situation, and while they embrace their Egyptian upbringing, they still carry a deep commitment to Judaism and to the Jewish people. That is, at their core, who they are. In that moment, they are able to break down some of the cultural biases that Jacob had internalized. We know that we as Jews today also carry much of the same concerns. And we are blessed that here at Etz Chaim, we are doing a great deal of work to break down these implicit biases that we all carry with us. We are learning and growing, evaluating how we can continue to open our doors to diverse and wonderful people all of the wonderful people who walk through our doors physically and online. Hello to those online every Shabbat. As we continue to break down these barriers and continue to affirm the different identities of the people in our midst, we are becoming stronger as a congregation, removing some of the blurriness that may have previously obscured our vision. As we head into this new year, it is my hope that each of us and that we as a community continue to do the work to truly see each person before us for who they are, externally and internally. I hope that as we begin to close out 2021 and look towards 2022, we continue to find ways to remove the uncertainty and uncloud our vision so that we can continually strive to be a welcoming congregation who offers blessings to all who are in our midst. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. My name is Rachel Wood. I have a few announcements tonight. Next Friday, December 24th, you are invited to Shabbat service and Chinese food dinner at Eitz Chaim. All are welcome. More information can be found on our website. Services will begin at 6:30. Mark your calendar for January 21st. Backed by popular demand, Pamela Schuler will be presenting at our Shabbat services for Jewish Disabilities Awareness and Acceptance and Inclusion Month. Pam is an internationally known disability and mental health advocate and a professional stand-up comedian. We hope you will join us that evening. Thank you to Rabbi Weiner for leading our service, to Jason Hill and the choir for providing the music, to David Wood for being our usher, and to me for being the greeter. Next Friday night, December 24th, services will begin at 6:30 p.m. And again, like I said, will be followed by a Chinese food dinner. Shabbat Shalom.
Our service continues now on page 282. It is my pleasure to invite up Ryan, Jaron, and Rhea Ruggles to help us open the Ark for Aleinu. Please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit gedula l'yotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, ve'lo samanu k'mishpechot ha'adama, shelo samchakinu kahem, ve'gor aleinu kechol hamonam. V'anachnu korim u'mishtachlavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamoavim hakadosh baruch hu. Please be seated. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who have died at this season and in years past. And on this Shabbat, we remember Rosalind Barkin, grandmother-in-law of Lori Silver, Morris Cherney, father of William Cherney, David Paliea, father of Gary Paliea, Hattie Rosen, mother of Judith Stein, James Sawyer, father of Michael Sawyer, Edith Simpson, mother of Harvey Simpson, Sarah Brickman, grandmother of Levi Eli, Richard G. Freed, father of Richard Freed, Glenn Lawrence Sr., brother-in-law of Cindy Michelasi, Robert Liggett, father of Catherine Lease, Benjamin Reinhardt, grandfather of Julie Mandrew, Julius Rickelson, uncle of Barry Merriman, Melvin Rubin, uncle of Sharon Froelich, Nancy Wright, wife of Mark Wright, mother of Laney and Thomas Wright, Nettie Holzman, mother of Linda Sarku, Claire Redmond, grandmother of Sharon Clark, Hirsch Redmond, grandfather of Sharon Clark, Rose Svarzas, grandmother of Linda Mayer, Gloria Bliss, cousin of Terry Shapiro, Hyman Goldman, grandfather of Lynn Sullivan, Beverly Daniel, aunt of Kara Kapp, Ida Turner, mother of Mark Turner and Leslie Turner, Sarah Harris, mother of Alan Harris, Stephen Stengel, brother of Toby Weber, Florence Trofimo, mother of Jordan Trofimo, grandmother of Janet Widmeyer, William Goldstein, father of Howard Goldstein, Lester Margulies, father of Perry Margulies, Jack Williams, father of Mitchell Williams, Michael Ehrenstein, grandfather of Susan Wolfe, Berta Ehrenstein, grandmother of Susan Wolfe, Al Wexler, uncle of Nancy and Barry Rich. And we mourn the recent passing of David Baruch, father of Rachel Yackley and a founding member of Etz Chaim, and Barbara Worlinski, mother and mother-in-law of Seth Worlinski, and Akari Shimizu, grandmother of Kai Worlinski. We rise together and turn to page 294 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabam, be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, be'chayechon uvyamechon uvchaye dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabam v'varach le'olam u'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shmei dekudasha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'asei shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Zichronam livracha, may all of their memories be for a blessing. Please be seated. We continue now with our concluding song, Adon Olam, the words of which can be found on page 321. It's my pleasure at this point in time to invite up the Eatman family to help lead us in Kiddush and Motzi. Kiddush can be found on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri v'afen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila Lemikra kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'charta, ve'otanu kidasha, mikol hamim, ve'shabbat kodshecha, be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu, baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. Amen. We'll honorarily say l'chaim, and you can have grape juice and wine at our own egg following this. We join together in Motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'tei avon. I hope that you all have a wonderful and warm Shabbat. Shabbat shalom. My pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, go and drink some own egg.